Hey, and it's so good to be back. Oh my goodness. Welcome everyone to season 4 of Wealthy Wednesdays. Monica Matthews here, owner of Queen Care Products, where our tagline is to indulge, engage, and uplift. We want people to indulge in self-care practices that really support optimal health. We want to engage with each other, get to know each other well. And we want to uplift those who are most vulnerable amongst us. And I'm here with my lovely co-host.
Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Tajiana Ellis. I go by Taji. I serve as the Chief Program Officer at Life Enrichment Group. So I'm super excited to be here with you all.
Yes, and a lot of people don't know, but Taji is my right hand, my left hand, my up, my down, my all around. So I'm so excited to get to host Wealthy Wednesday with her. And you know what? You might ask, what is Wealthy Wednesdays all about? I'm glad you asked, because Wealthy Wednesday is an online health initiative that really focuses on learning and relearning how to properly take care of ourselves. We started Wealthy Wednesday in 2020 during the pandemic to really keep us together and keep us in a good space. And we felt like this was a good time to bring it back for sure. We envision this time together really to consist of sharing information that will feed our mind, body, and soul, and to cultivate our lives to really exude wealth, right? Wealthy Wednesday. And so essentially we're investing this time in ourselves tonight, taking a moment out of the week to say yes to ourselves and indulging in self-care practices that support optimal health.
Listen, that's my kind of show. And I'm just so glad that you all said yes to tuning in tonight, whether you are live, whether you're going to watch the replay. There are so many ways to stay connected with us. This show is just one of them. But other ways you can stay connected with us is to make sure you like, comment, and share this video. Follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And don't forget to visit www.queencareproducts.com.
Yes, visit us. And you know what? We're going to get into some real talk today. But first, before we get into all of that, we have a special guest and everything. I want to say happy birthday, happy early birthday to Tajiana. Her birthday is tomorrow, but since this is Wealthy Wednesday Eve of your birthday, happy, wonderful birthday, Taji, and we wish you many, many more.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yes. All right. So let's get down to the meat of today. If you missed last week, we talked about how over the next few weeks we'll be processing pandemic realities in an effort to really release and establish or reestablish post-pandemic care rituals for ourselves. I think it was like last month in May where, the CDC, the state, and everybody said, you know what, the pandemic's over, we're officially back to normal. But have we really processed 2020, 2021, 2022, we're in 23 now. And we want to do this simply so that we can perform at our highest level, right? And so just a little disclaimer about these next few weeks, including today's session, is like these topics are very personal and sensitive that we're going to be discussing. We were very intentional about wanting to discuss these topics because having a healthy mind state is really the backbone to having a wealthy life, really and truly. So today we're going to be discussing depression and anxiety. And these two topics in themselves are definitely heavy in nature, but even more heavy when we do not have the tools to process through these emotions and feelings. I'm so excited today that we have a top-notch therapist that's going to be joining us today, who we will be introducing shortly. Listen, but first, we got something for you out there.
But first, as always, we have our question of the day. So you know how we do, everybody. Every week we come with the question of the day. So today's no different. So today's question of the day is, What questions do you have about depression and anxiety? As Monica already mentioned, we have a licensed psychologist here with us today. So if you have questions about depression, if you have questions about anxiety, this is your opportunity to ask questions, and we will have a question and answer live later on in the show. However, without further ado, we are going to introduce our special guest, and actually will be actually our guest for the whole entire season. So we're super excited to have a licensed psychologist join us this season as we unpack the pandemic, as Monica already talked about. So join me in welcoming Dr. Ghynecee Temple, aka Dr. Jen, who is a licensed psychologist that is passionate about supporting others, improving community well-being. Dr. Temple obtained her bachelor's degree in psychology from Eastern Washington University and her doctorate in counseling psychology from Washington State University. Okay. She has worked within higher education and the private sector throughout her career and has translated her skills into teaching, workshop facilitation, consultation work, and executive coaching. Dr. Temple has been actively engaged in EDI work for several years and has had the opportunity to work with others across the globe to engage in this challenging but meaningful work. Dr. Temple describes herself as a genuine and humorous person that enjoys traveling, spending time with family and friends, and watching sports, especially college football. So join us in welcoming Dr. Jen, everybody.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
Welcome, Dr. Jen. I gotta say that, like, we are so fortunate to have you today. I know that during the pandemic, you're like very busy and helping a lot of people work through things. And I've been watching your journey even before the pandemic hit, and I'm so very proud of you, Dr. Jen. And I'm so very honored that you took the time to be here with us to help process through some really heavy topics, some topics that are important though for us to plow through and get to. So welcome and thank you for being here at Wealthy Wednesday with us.
Yes, thank you for having me. I feel honored and thankful, and yeah, I'm ready to jump in.
Well, let's do that. Let's jump right on in and we'll check the comments to see if anyone has questions throughout. But listen, I want you to expound deeply on the following 3 questions, and however you want to answer them in whatever order is up to you. But we want to know, like, how did you get into this field? Why is mental health and therapy so important? And lastly, today we're talking about depression and anxiety. What exactly is depression and what exactly is anxiety?
Okay. Yeah, I like the order. So I'll just go in order. Um, how did I first get into how did I get into this field? Since childhood, I knew I wanted to be a helper. I always have cared about people really deeply. I just love people, love being around people, love being supportive. And so I had that sense of wanting to be someone in the world who was contributing in a positive way. As I got older, people were like, oh, you should be a lawyer because you always argue and got stuff to say. Then I went to college, and at first my major actually wasn't psychology. It was forensic science, because I thought that's when like CSI was hot, the original, not the reboot. And I was like, okay, I can help families get closure. And, this narrative of wanting to be a helper. But I had like this mid-college life crisis where I was recognizing that field wasn't as humanistic as I wanted it to be. And so I think it was during one of the winter breaks, I went back to my parents' house and I was kind of just sitting there crying, feeling emotional, trying to figure it out. Like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, this isn't right for me. And I actually found a journal from high school. And in the journal, I was talking crazy. I was like, I just need to know why people do the things they do. Maybe I should study psychology, because I don't get it. Because high school, I don't know about y'all, but high school was a wild ride. There was a lot of stuff happening.
Okay.
So I took it serious, and I ended up taking a class. I registered for one, a psychology class for the next quarter. fell in love instantly. I loved learning about people, motivations for things, how we change, how we grow. What are the things that get in our way of being the very best versions of ourselves? So the rest was history. I kept taking the classes, and then it came to a point where graduation was nearing. I needed to make some choices. So I decided to apply for graduate programs, master's and PhD programs, and I actually got into Washington State University. And, from there it was challenging, but I think it really solidified how much I recognized that we needed this in our community. What got me through my program was my community, was thinking about the west side of the state, everywhere from Tacoma to Seattle and all around and everywhere else, just thinking about people I knew who were struggling that looked like me. Also thinking about, I never met a Black psychologist. I never had anybody that was Black come talk to us about mental health from a framework that we could understand our experiences on a day in and day out basis. So really what has motivated me to be in this field and remain in this field has been my desire to positively impact our community, which is why I recently pivoted from doing individual therapy work to now working for the government doing equity, diversity, and inclusion work, because systems impact our well-being, our mental health, our relationships with each other. And so now I'm taking my psychologist training to that next level to bring it to larger communities. So that's how I got into the field. So I'll pause, lots of words, but want to check in with the both of you to see if you have any thoughts or questions about that.
I love that. We have to normalize this thing called mental health in therapy, and especially in the Black community. I mean, I can't really speak about any other community. I'm Black, so I'm gonna speak about that experience. I know that experience well, and we're taught to, sweep things on the rug. Don't be telling our business outside the house. Don't be letting them people in our business. And we can literally be suffering in silence for so very long, just off the fact of not even like being socialized to tell people, hey, I'm not feeling so well, or hey, I think I need some help. I'm thinking a certain way or something like that. So I'm really glad that you pursued this field, because we do need to normalize it, and we do need more Black therapists. We don't have a lot at all because of our thought processes. But I know that a tide has turned, and I would not, I don't want to say it was because of the pandemic, but maybe it was because the pandemic hit and shook everybody up to say, let's relook at this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. You couldn't hide from it, right? You couldn't hide from your thoughts, your feelings, those really painful truths, or even those, light bulb enlightenment moments about who we are, how we're showing up. And that's what I love. And I think for a racial group who has experienced our history here, right? Not our history of our whole full lineage is full of trauma and pain. But if we're talking about Black American life, generational trauma is a real thing. It's a genetic thing. It happens. And so I think for me, it broke my heart to think about how those messages were unintentionally or intentionally sewed into me, right? Suck it up. So, you'll get over it. You'll be fine. It's like, no, this is actually really painful. And what helped me find my strength, and I think why I love, having these discussions, is that I'm a very transparent and vulnerable person. How I've learned to heal and navigate and be a full human has been talking authentically about things that are hurting me or things that I'm proud of, and not feeling ashamed for being a human. I think when we play into these narratives of like, keep all that business by yourself, it's giving people permission to harm you and not take accountability or ownership for that. I think, the Zora Neale Hurston quote is like, they'll kill you until you enjoyed it. And that hit deep for me. I'm like, oh yeah, if you don't speak up, nobody knows. And I'm a mother, and I don't want my daughter to grow up and feel like you have to, be harmed and not be able to have space to talk about that harm. So I feel like this work is really healing work. And yet, there's an intellectual side to it, but at the heart of it, it's really touching the hearts and minds of people. And so I think this is leading into your question about like, why is mental health and therapy so important? So as I'm talking about it through the lens and perspective of a psychologist. And I always say that to differentiate, like I was trained to really research, study, analyze our thought processes, our emotional processes, our social dynamics, and behavior to really understand how do things, impact us. How does, living next, like we talk about pollution and mental health. How does living near polluted water or facilities impact our mental health? Because all of those things are interconnected. How does our social, situations, there's a lot of legislation around the country that's being implemented to harm people. How do those things factor into our mental health? We do not exist in a vacuum or isolation. Our experiences, past, present, and potential future, impact how we feel. So when I'm talking about mental health, I have to try to explain to people that, our brain is the control center of your entire body. Mental health is about how you are experiencing the world, what you're putting out into the world, what you're putting into your body. And so we have to understand, if our brain is what keeps us breathing, our hearts beating, then our thoughts, perceptions, decisions are highly influenced by how we feel, what we learned, etc. So when our mental health isn't in the best place, it can mess up our functioning. I don't know about you two, but have you ever been so stressed that you couldn't sleep or eat?
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Have you ever been so sad that you isolated and distanced yourself from people?
Absolutely.
Maybe blew up on a friend, family, coworker, had this irritable moment and couldn't control it. Maybe even engage in some behaviors that caused you shame and embarrassment. That's mental health. So I try to explain to people, like, people don't even understand, like, how your thyroid, like your physical health. The thyroid is the control center. I don't know if you all know people with Graves' disease, but auntie, my sister, and my grandma have that. When their thyroid is not well, they are storming, which means a mood is a range. Okay, we're starting positive, and now you got cussed out. So people have to understand, like, when I'm talking about mental health, I'm talking about your whole self and how that impacts how you think, how you feel, how you treat yourself and others. So that's how I think about mental health holistically. And then therapy, I feel like, is really important, because at the heart of humans, we want to be seen and heard. I always tell people we want to be seen, validated, and heard. You think when people make those posts on social media or they come to you personally, like, people want to feel like they're not alone. I hear it so often in my work, like, I must be the only one. And I'm like, you, out of 7 billion people, you think you're the only one that's sad? And I don't say it to judge, but I'm like, we need to have space to recognize that this is human stuff, that this is normal stuff that we experience. um Therapy, in theory, should be this non-judgmental, supportive space where you can explore and address issues that are impacting your mental health. And I want to also name that therapy is just not a place for problems. A lot of people have this misperception, and I know therapy is now becoming more mainstream, that you have to be crazy or everything has to be wrong. I actually meet with my own therapist, and it's not always about what's going wrong. I just met with her 2 days ago, and I was telling her this breakthrough I had, and this beautiful moment of growth I had, and how proud I was for really getting to this point. Sometimes people just come to therapy to figure out how to be even a better version of themselves. So it's not all gloom and doom. It's just this space to show up authentically, be empowered, and learn ways to navigate challenges and thrive. So that's my piece about mental health and therapy.
Yeah.
Come
Thank
on.
you for that. Thank you for that. And I think the real piece in there is the importance of, like you said, transparency and being vulnerable. And so when Taji and I were talking about, season 4 Wealthy Wednesday, what we're going to talk about, we're like, it makes sense, post-pandemic care, but that definitely means that we have to be vulnerable and transparent. I was meeting with someone, and you know how we're all on Zoom these days and work from home and stuff like that. We might rarely see people, and this person hadn't seen me in a while. They had only seen my Facebook. And when I saw them face to face, they were like, how are you? And that day I wasn't doing so well. And I was like, I got a lot going on. Actually, I had a lot going on for the last year, and this, that, this, and that. They were like, oh my God, I wouldn't even known that, going off your Facebook. And I was like, well, we all know that, Facebook is Facebook. And a lot of times we don't show the other side. We only show the glamorous side. I'm guilty of that as well, right? Just showing the upside and not really showing the other side of things, And I'm a real person too. I have challenges and things that I go through too. And so I was like, this is the great season, a good time to really establish some post-pandemic rituals, to really get into mental health, to really help normalize it, and be transparent for our own healing. Like I have my own healing process that I'm going through at the time, Taji too. And so I couldn't think of a better, way to lead by example, if you will, and just being vulnerable about, some of my stuff. You know? In a safe in a safe space too, and even for the young people, like, we tell them, the real, like I tell them the real, like this is what it is, what's going on. You're not always gonna be, feeling like you're on a pedestal and up and down, but the more tools we have, the better to be able to navigate through, because we're going to have these emotions. So let's talk about it, because like, the next few weeks, like, today we have depression and anxiety that we're talking about with you. We have, grief and loss. We have, relationships and, all of these deep subjects in order to release. Cause that's another thing, Dr. Jen, like holding on to stuff longer than we need to, and then having all this trauma in our body, like physically in our, so it's in our mind but also physically in our body. And I just keep hearing this thing about releasing, just release, let it go. But we have to learn how to release, especially if you've been holding on to stuff for generations.
Yes. Yes, and I think that leads to, you're asking, what is depression? What is anxiety? And so, first I want to, as I'm talking about this, I'm going to oscillate between clinical mind and, Dr. Jen. So because I love giving people context so you can kind of understand. So first, depression and anxiety can be triggered by a number of factors. And they can also have comorbidity. And what that means is they can actually occur at the same time together. And so sometimes it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? So I want to name that too. Like, it's not always easy to pull apart what's influencing what. But when I say they can be triggered by a number of different factors, I also try to explain to people that mental health crisis and distress can happen to anybody, which means that these symptoms of depression or of anxiety can be triggered by a change in health status, by an accident, by death and loss, by a really tumultuous time in life, by chemical processes, etc. So I always try to explain that to people, because this is how we build empathy and understanding, right? Sometimes people are like, oh, you're just so anxious, or oh, you're depressed, this is too depressing for me. But it's like, our mental health can change at a drop of a dime. And I really need people to understand that. And also knowing that these things do not have to be a forever. Oftentimes mental health, crises improve or lessen in severity, especially as we get older or as we cope and take care of ourselves. So I want to frame it to get people to understand that any three of us and anybody tuning in can experience significant depression or anxiety. So what I want to say is they both impact mood, but what differentiates them is that when you're experiencing depression, and really I'm thinking like clinical depression, there's a persistent feeling of sadness that you feel daily or on most days. That's like the furthest end of the spectrum. And there's plenty of, diagnoses in between here or there. And you don't always need a diagnosis to validate how you feel in your body. So I want to throw that out there as well. Anxiety tends to be more grounded in worry and fear, often about things you can't control. So you might start thinking about things from the past, and then you're worried about, will you be prepared tomorrow? Where will you eat? Where will you sleep? Will you be okay? Will this person like you? Will you get rejected? And that it is clouding up your vision. So that's usually how people differentiate. Are you worried about something, or are you feeling this pervasive sadness? Either way, both can really impact your health and well-being. I try to explain to people that depression is more than, just having one bad day or a rough week. People who, are suffering from moderate to severe depression often experience that sadness I was talking about. Hopelessness is a big piece. So if you hear people, and I always tell you to listen for what people in your circle are saying or not saying, right? If they're just like, oh, I don't have plans for the future, or no, I'm not really excited about anything, that's cueing you into they might be feeling hopeless. Loss of interest and pleasure in most things is another big indicator. So if you realize that even for yourself that you used to love to knit, and now the thought of picking up a needle and the thread gives you no pleasure, no excitement, that's information. And often folks withdraw, and people withdraw away from people who are experiencing moderate or severe depression, right? Like I can even think in my own life, maybe there's times I unintentionally or intentionally distance myself from people because it was just like, it could be energy sucking.
Mhm.
And it's not to poop on people who are feeling bad. It's just like, it's a real thing. Like you, and if people don't know that they're navigating depression, you're just like, I don't want that. I don't know what you're bringing. Low energy, tired, sleeping all the time, no motivation to do things. So those are some of the things to look for depression. In terms of anxiety, I first want to normalize that anxiety gets a bad rap. People hear anxiety and it's a negative, but anxiety is actually, it can actually be good for you. I There's this thing called like the stress curve, and it basically talks about, like, if you think of a bell curve, in the middle is like optimal anxiety. When you're experiencing some anxiety, it motivates you to get things done. So think about a deadline for work. You're like, oh, I know I got this thing to do. I'm feeling a little anxious, which means I know I need to be working on it. As the deadline gets closer, you're like, okay, I need to get closer. That's healthy level of anxiety. But when we lean too far to the left or the right of that center is where we run into problems. So when we're thinking about how to figure out if we're feeling anxious, pay attention to your thoughts. If they're causing you significant or noticeable distress, and that can be in your body. So physically, are you sweating? Is your heart racing? Are you running out of breath? Just kind of having that panic attack kind of breathing. Emotionally, are you feeling scared, worried, frozen? Is it stopping you from doing things? Oftentimes people with anxiety avoid it. This thing makes me so anxious. I'm not going to make that phone call. I'm not going to go have that meeting. So think about it in that way. Um, those are just some things. And you can also isolate when you're feeling anxious. And if it gets to the point where, and I always tell people, either with depression or anxiety, if either of those get to a point where you cannot do the basic things to take care of yourself, it is time to seek help from a professional. Like I said, it's on a spectrum. Most of the time we can cope with it, but sometimes we need a little help, and that's okay.
Mm. You know, this is really, really good information, Dr. Jen. And, you know, it really bothers me to the core, like that so many of us are carrying around these burdens, and like I like to call it, you know, suffering and silence around depression and anxiety and not knowing how to cope. And in relation to those pandemic years in particular, for me, you know, 2020 really shed like a super spotlight on these two states, like within me. Like, and it literally took the pandemic for me to recognize that I was falling deeper and deeper into this hole. Like the world literally had to stop for me to like realize that I was like carrying around this 70-ton gorilla on my back called anxiety, and probably a little bit of depression too. And I remember so many times, Dr. Jen, like I just couldn't get out the bed, you know, and I know that there's people out there that can relate to me with that. And, you know, this was prior to, to the lockdown. This is prior to lockdown. And so for me, the pandemic was bittersweet. You know, there were things that I had to like face within myself. Like you said, we couldn't run from ourselves, right?
Nope.
And you know, I was forced to deal with some things, and I saw these patterns of avoidance, you know, in particular with my communication. You know, I really wasn't able to produce like I knew I could, you know, and it was like this vicious cycle of self-sabotage just kicked in every single time, you know. And as time went on with the pandemic, you know, I was able to identify a really big root that was fueling some of this, you know, anxiety within me, and I plucked it. You know, the irony is really that I was only able to pluck it because my world slowed down to stop, you know, giving me some real time to think and process. And I know that I had some divine intervention too, you know, to help me identify, you know, what I needed to really explore to start healing. But so my question to you, Dr. Jen, is like, how do we stop that cycle of self-sabotage that can be fueled, you know, by anxiety and depression?
Ooh, that's a good question. Ooh. I always tell people the first step is recognizing that you're doing
Mhm.
it.
Mm.
Because, listening to you share, you were functioning, right? You're not really knowing that this is what you've been doing.
Mm.
Um, I always tell people, when you can recognize the problem, you can start working to solve the problem. And so I think when we're engaging in self-sabotage, asking ourselves, what are the things we value? What do I want to move toward in my life? And then you examine those behaviors that you're engaging in, right? Does this behavior move me towards that value, the way that I want to live my life, the way that I want to show up in the world? Or is this behavior moving me away from that? And
Mm,
that's how you start to think, okay, well, when this thing, because you identify your triggers, right? So when this behavior is coming up that wants to move me away from, the prayers I've sent out there, the blessings coming down the pipeline, this is what I'm going to do to disrupt that behavior. This is the person I'm going to call on for help. This is the prayer I'm going to say. This is the resource I'm going to use so that I can continue to move towards this other direction. And
mm,
really think about, what are those behaviors that show you that you are moving towards who you want to be and how you want to show up in the world. If I want to be
mm,
honest, here was a moment of a conversation with someone. Did I tell them how their words really made me feel? I did. I was being honest. That's moving me to that goal and value of authenticity. So
mm.
noticing, naming what you're doing to move towards it, what you're moving away from, and getting those resources together is what I think could be really helpful to disrupting that self-sabotage.
That's really good, especially that piece about authenticity.
Yeah.
Because listen, we'll lie to everybody and we'll lie to ourselves too, and that really doesn't serve us, and so getting to the heart of the matter, like, I don't know. There's a saying, it's leaving me right now, but it's like, you can lie to everybody else, but don't lie to yourself. Like,
Yeah, right.
we need
Listen.
to be real about that. So yeah, thank you for that. Those are some really, really good tips, especially about the naming it. And you know what? That's the piece about slowing down to stop and not filling your time with every single thing and not spending time with yourself to talk to yourself, to even be able to name it, you
Exactly.
know? So yeah, that's real good. That's real good. Um, I want to get into like some more care points. We want to call them care points or healing points on, how to deal with anxiety. You talked about a lot. You talked about, your mind being the most important thing that you possess because it's the center of all of this that's going on with us. You talked about how anxiety and things show up in your physical body and that how, our physical environment can play a part into our mental health. What care tips can you leave us with around, like, how do we identify and alleviate anxiety? Well, you talked about, how to
Mhm.
and identify a little bit, but how do we get some relief from some of this
Yeah,
anxiety?
absolutely. I mean, like I said, the first thing is you got to pay attention to your thoughts, right? What you're thinking and how it's making you feel. And that's that slowing down you've named, right? Slow down. I think the world we live in is fast paced, boom, boom, boom. Everything is always in our face. You got to move those distractions to the side and just start checking in with you. So I will say one thing that helps me um do that is throughout the day I use this thing called ACE. It's like acknowledge, connect. It's like acknowledge what you're feeling and thinking, connect with your body, and
Mm,
engage in whatever it is that you're doing mindfully. And that
mm,
actually comes from this therapy modality called ACT, acceptance commitment therapy. And I'm really pushing this for like anxiety because ACT has been around, but I love it because it has helped me. And I'm reading the book called The Happiness Trap by I think it's Dr. Russ Harris is his name. I 10 out of 10 recommend this book because a lot of times when we're thinking and we're feeling anxious, we're running with a narrative. A thought on its own is not anything, right? It's just a thought. It's just words inside of our head, but we empower these thoughts when we're running anxious and we
mm,
believe them to be truth or fact or a commandment or a rule, and how we respond to that. And what I love about acting, this is a type of therapy people can get, or book, I would say, The Happiness Trap, is it helps you re reconfigure how you think about anxious thoughts, and you're more curious about it and you're creating distance. So when I have an anxious thought, I'm like, here goes that same thought of not being good enough. I see that thought. And right now, it makes me want to back away from this opportunity. It's pushing me away from that ideal self, that value. And ACT really talks about your values and what are you doing to move towards it. And you start to talk to the thought. what information is this thought giving me? Maybe I don't feel like I'm prepared enough.
Mm,
Okay, what do I need to do to prepare? So instead of trying to take a negative thought, because you can't stop a negative thought, but you can talk to it, examine it, and what are you really trying to tell me? Okay, you're telling me I need to prep. I can
mm,
prep, no problem. So we're not fighting against it, right? So I think that's a good practice. Any practices that physically soothe the body, we hold anxiety in our bodies. I don't know if you ever notice your jaw might be tight. I know I'm anxious when my jaw's stuck, when I'm just like, ooh,
mm,
some of us hold it in
mm,
our hands and our feet. You ever just felt like, oh, my back is like stiff. So I always encourage people to walk,
mm,
exercise, do yoga. Deep stretching is really good for our bodies. An easy one you can do when you're in public is you tense up like a muscle. So you tense your hands, hold it for 10 seconds, and then release. You're literally pushing that energy out.
mm,
Cold showers to kind of jolt you out of that thought process. I also
mm.
tell people to do exposure work. So what is the thing you're worried or fearful about happening? Maybe, you're afraid to take that leap of faith to post your business and see if people, how they respond, because then that will correct the thought that you have. And then I always encourage spiritual and cultural practices. So many of us have depthful knowledge, depthful experiences with different practices, depending on our cultural beliefs that we can tap into to take care of ourselves. So if there are any ones that help you feel empowered and help you calm your mind, please go for it. So that's just a little bit about what I think could be helpful for, alleviating anxiety.
That's super duper helpful.
So good.
So good, so good. Now, what about depression? I want to ask you the same thing. Like, what do we do if we feel like we're experiencing depression? And I'm glad that you delineated between, like, there's levels to this thing, right? There's the extreme side, and then there's, the other side, and then there's all in between different levels of, sadness, right? So like, and we know that, feeling sad is a human emotion that we all have, and so this is one thing too, is that we're not really taught or socialized how to deal with our emotions, like that emotional intelligence thing. Like, we're
Mhm.
emotionally not intelligent. Like,
Yes.
we get sad or mad or da 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 da. We don't know how to deal with that. Like, we may know how to deal with when we're feeling good and all of that, but not on the with the negative emotions, and not even negative emotions like you just said. Like, we might need to experience some anxiety to get something done. It's just a natural occurrence, right?
Yeah.
But the problem comes in, like, when we get stuck in depression, like we get stuck there
Mhm.
and can't
Yes.
move. So like, what would you suggest around, sadness? Just not even like on the extreme level of depression, but just like, how do we deal with sadness?
Yeah. Yes. Thank you for normalizing the emotions. I always, when people are like, I don't want to be sad, I'm like, well, news for you. Research has shown that humans experience like 54,000 different emotions. So welcome to the
Wow.
party. Yeah, we can get into that at a different day. I did some research around that. It's like we are emotionally complex. So yes, sadness is a
Mhm.
thing that happens. And so when we are feeling sad, it's similar to kind of what I was talking about with anxiety, with the happiness trap and the mindfulness pieces. Let's greet that sadness. I think we have this notion of we need to feel happy. First of all, happy is just as a fleeting state as sadness. No one
Mhm,
is happy all the time. That's not real. What
mhm,
we're aiming for, or healthily should aim for, is content. I am content in this moment, right? Not too hot, not too cold. I'm just cruising. So when sadness does come up, be curious about that sadness. Welcome that sadness. Explore that sadness. I'm feeling sad. What's going on that could be contributing to this? Because that's information. Maybe you're sad because you're not, living in your full potential. Maybe you're sad because you had a breakup. That's normal. And then normalizing it like, yeah, of course I would be feeling sad. I just lost a really important relationship and that mattered. And when we start to talk within ourselves and understand our sadness and emotions, we don't spend that energy trying to fight it, and then we get more sad and more depressed because we didn't beat the sadness.
Mhm.
mm,
Sometimes you make that space. I tell people, especially when I'm working with folks with anxiety and depression, go ahead, set aside some time to be sad. Give yourself 2 hours. Put a timer on. If you need to cry, if you need to vent, whatever you need to do, let that happen for yourself. A lot of the distress with especially depression is we don't give ourselves that time to feel
Mhm.
it. We feel embarrassed that we're sad because I think there's a lot, especially in our community, around don't feel sad. No, that week I got enough going on. I can't handle yours too. So let's start normalizing sadness for our own selves. And then also depending on the severity, right? There's different things you can try. I always tell people, if you notice your sadness happens more in the winter, it might be seasonal depression, seasonal sadness. Get a
Mm,
happy light. Happy light is
mm,
a light that mimics the sun's rays, gives us that vital vitamin D that we miss out during the winter months. I have a
mm,
lot of people who do the light therapy, who sit in front of the light for 15 minutes. A lot of centers are starting to have the happy light rooms where people can lay in there soothing with the bright light on them. Exercising, just similar for anxiety, it releases a lot of positive neurochemicals. Support groups, because I think we need to normalize sadness and normalize supporting each other. Staying connected, leaning into those spiritual cultural practices as well. And then, for those who are a little bit further on the spectrum, there's specific types of therapies like ACT, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness based cognitive behavioral therapy, and medication. I don't try to push meds on people first, but I'm also not judging it because I've also seen medication do some beautiful things for people who are really struggling. And I always explain medication is like, medication is not a happy pill. It's not going to put you here. But if this was your baseline and you took some meds, they're going to help you get here. And then you do the rest of the work to continue taking care of yourself. So
mm.
I always leave that on the table too. So those are just a couple of things that I would suggest, if folks are starting to feel depression or sadness, and also reconnect to your meaning of life, your values. That helps you ground yourself. Like, I am important. Life is meaningful because of these reasons. These are the things I want to see in my life. And this is what I'm going to give, the effort I'm going to give to work towards that. So
Mm.
reconnecting and rooting ourselves is really important.
That's so
Wow.
good.
Wow, Dr. Jen, those are some jewels that you've shared tonight. Thank you
Absolutely.
so very much. We're going to compile all of those jewels too and make sure that we post them, out on our page. And you know what? We could go on and on about this all night, but I am so glad that we get to have you back each week for the
Yeah.
next weeks to really help us, increase our knowledge and skill set around these heavy topics, that literally can have us carrying weight in our everyday lives. So we appreciate you, Dr. Jen. Thank you so much for the jewels that you dropped tonight. We'll see you next week on Wealthy Wednesday. And thank you so much for helping us process through, release, and really set up some healthy rituals post-pandemic care. Thank you, Dr. Jen.
Yes. Thank you both for having me.
Yes. And do we want to see anybody in the comments?
Yes. Do we have some questions for Dr. Jen?
Not necessarily questions, but some people did just drop in.
Yes, please. Let's hear it.
So hey Trina, I think Trina was just relating to something that was being said earlier about just, the emotional, feeling the emotions and outbursts. So she was relating to that, saying all the time. So thank you, Trina, for sharing that and tuning in. I also saw just saying hi to Naomi, one of our students from our Black College tour, tuning in. And then Atan Marie is saying that dealing with health issues and grieving recent family members' deaths has me there right now and seeking to speak with a Black woman therapist. And I did let her know, I let everybody know that, this is a good time if you did have questions or want to connect. We have Dr. Jen with us.
We have Dr. Jen with us. And if not ready or prepared, there we go. Are you taking patients?
That was the next question.
I was about to say, if you're not prepared to have your question, we got Dr. Jen for 6 weeks, but boom, there we have it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not, because I transitioned, taking a break, a sabbatical from providing therapy. But for those who are interested in referrals, I can pass that along to the both of you to send to the networks to help people find therapists. And I'm pretty sure people are probably wanting to connect with Black therapists, actually know where to find a couple. So I'm here to pass that information to some clinicians that can really do some great work and be a great supportive resource.
Perfect.
That's awesome.
Yes, we will definitely make sure you get that information for sure.
Absolutely. And one last comment, it was Naomi.
Mm,
I love tonight's conversation. Much needed. Thank you. Thank you, Naomi,
yes.
for tuning in, and everybody who tuned in tonight and who's going to watch the replay. Like, I know this was needed for me, so I'm so glad to hear that it was helpful for everybody else.
Yes, yes. And please, tune in the next 6 weeks, Wealthy Wednesday. We're talking about, these are real things. This is real life. And these are things that we need to know about and master as far as our emotions are concerned, to be able to, perform at our best and feel our best. We want to feel our best so we can do our best,
Absolutely.
And that's that.
And that's that.
Well, thank you, Dr. Jen, and we will see you next Wednesday for sure.
Yes, we will.
Yes. I have a couple of announcements as we wrap up Wealthy Wednesday tonight. We went a little over, but these topics are so important. We got to talk about this, y'all. But I do have some announcements. We set off our Queen Care Summer Series last Friday with our open mic karaoke night. It was hosted by the Tajiana Ellis with Enlighten One Productions. Sunday was our self-care and sip day. Monday, we released a few pounds with Fitness for the Culture. And yesterday, we had a lovely, lovely time at our adult craft night, which is essentially art therapy. There's so many different tips and tools around this therapy thing, and it doesn't always look like sitting on the couch talking to someone, y'all. So all of these events are going to be on repeat every second week of the month, and will take place right at Queen Care on 23rd and Jackson. So I would love, love, love to see you all. Dr. Jen talked about, communicating with each other, engaging with each other, building relationships with each other. Those are also good tools and care points for us to, get us through things. So I'm excited about those announcements on the Queen Care side. Taji, what you got for Life Enrichment Group?
Yes, so excited for the Queen Care side. So y'all come through. For Life Enrichment Group, you all, we have our summer programming. We have our middle school program. The Scholars Project is for grades 6 through 8. This is for young ladies and young boys. So we would love to have your scholar this summer. It's a 5-week program. We will be out at South Shore starting July 5th through August 4th. This is a free program providing free academic enrichment, reading and writing support, and some fun as well. We have activities and everything, incentives, all kinds of things. So definitely the place to be for the summer for your middle school student. And then in addition to that, we have our youth and business program, which is a paid internship, again, paid. So we're paying 9 interns, young ladies who are the ages of 14 to 18. They must either attend a school in Seattle or they must live in Seattle. So those are the only 3 criteria, and you'll be able to be a part of internship. Is going to teach you about entrepreneurship. It's going to teach about economic development. It's going to teach about personal development, life skills, all of that. So you definitely want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
Oh, I got a question. You can find all of the Queen Care opportunities. You can find that on the Queen Care page on Facebook and on Instagram for the Life Enrichment Group. You can find that on our Life Enrichment Group page. We have one on Facebook, Instagram, and our website. And then also I can make sure to put our email in the comments as well.
Yes, spread the word, spread the wealth. That's what Wealthy Wednesday is all about. And my final words for tonight. First of all, you all, thank you all for tuning in tonight and just saying yes to yourself. Like we're on this journey together. And so thank you for tuning in. And for those who are going to tune in later, thank you too. My final words tonight is really one word, and it's release. Release the stress. Let it go. Okay. Release the toxic. Say bye-bye. We really have to embrace and normalize mental health, not only for our own sakes, but for the next generation and the generation after that and a generation after that. You heard Dr. Jen when she said this is generational trauma that we're passing down. Let's stop that. Let's break these generational curses, if you will, and be healthy and well. And if we really want to realize wealth in its vast and highest form, we really have to start right here.
Literally.
So with that, everybody, thank you for being here, and we'll be back next week, same time, same channel. Have a blessed week, everybody. Keep it wealthy.
Bye.
Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. Welcome back.